Hello world, this is BetterTech, a podcast where we chat with some of the most successful leaders about the latest industry developments. So join us as we explore the world reliant on tech. This episode is brought to you by Techcell, a leading software development company. Check them out at techcell.com. Today we have with us Maria Pia, DeepTech strategic advisor and blockchain speaker, to talk about how blockchain's decentralization narrative is redefining data privacy. So Maria, can you start off with elaborating on the value of this technology for data security? Can you tell us more about the cybersecurity threats we are facing today and how blockchain technology fits into that domain?
Well, in terms of cybersecurity, what happens that in the first era of the internet, as we know, the information, that's the one that we have been using for the last 30 years, they have not been able to, manage this kind of issue. And mainly has to do because, in this internet, we were speaking about just information, that it didn't have value. But in this new internet era, with alternative of encryption, we are able to secure not just information, we can secure assets, transaction into the, into the deal, space. That is something that doesn't happen today. Today, for instance, you are not able to send money in a secure way in the internet of information.
Right.
Because somebody can get that, that asset. An asset can be property right, a patent, for instance. But with blockchain, the information is encrypted. So we have much more security standard. And actually, we are facing worldwide a cybersecurity problem. The last year, hackers have found very, creative ways to get our data. Actually, some few months ago, there was a scandal because just with one call through WhatsApp, hackers were able to get to your device, take all the data that was stored in your device, and you didn't have a clue about that. Also, there are other scandals like what happened with Ring lately, that they're getting into your home devices too. Right. And we're moving forward to the Internet of Things. Actually, today we have like 4 billion devices connected, and by 2030 we will have 1 trillion. So we need to secure first our identity, the user, but also our device. Data is the most important asset that we have.
Yeah. So interestingly, you mentioned that the WhatsApp thing, that hackers were able to get access to all sorts of information. So we know that Internet of Things is also on the rise. There are new advancements in that technology as well. So how do you see blockchain also playing a greater role where the Internet of Things is concerned?
What happens is that the data is encrypted. Encryption means that the data is transformed into code. Okay. And it's different because now you just have, when you don't have that data without encryption, that means that for hackers, they only just need to get into your ID and get that information. Also, what I can tell, I cannot prove, but I read about it in Forbes a few weeks ago, that it seems that there are also some blockchain projects regarding how to split the information and encrypt it. Yeah, because nowadays you store the whole asset encrypted, in a ledger, actually in different ledgers. That's what blockchain is about. But it seems that they are also working on trying to find a way to split the information that is already encrypted. So if somebody wants to hack, they will need to get into that encrypted information. Also, they will need to find all the pieces of that information. But in terms of what is up to do now with the technology, what happens that blockchain stores the encrypted information attached to your previous information. So then you have a chain of data encrypted. That means that to get to your latest data, you need to get into the previous one, and to get to your previous one, you have to get to the one that was before, and so on. So the largest the chain is, it's much more difficult for hackers to disencrypt the information. What is seen about, at least in terms of algorithm and mathematics, it seems that not even quantum data will be able to disencrypt blockchain chains that easy.
Right.
So, but finally, it's not, blockchain is one element. Mm-hmm. And the key to get to your data is digital identity. So when you talk about data privacy, you just don't need to think about blockchain. You also need to get to the key, talk about the key.
Okay.
And nowadays also happens that we mainly have passwords that are stored in databases.
Right.
So hackers, they go to those databases, they get information, they sell them in the dark web. And, they do this kind of in a very easy way. I mean, it can be an ID, a four numbers or 8 numbers password. It's very easy. So you need also to work on an encrypted digital identity.
So you mentioned that you need to get to the key, right? Securing the identity.
Yes.
That's very, very important. But since surveying the landscape of blockchain and cryptocurrencies, and considering that data breaches, even in the financial sector, are on the rise all the time. So how do you see that, since we do know that, yes, securing identity is important, but is that the sole way to go about it, or do we need to go somewhere else or use other technologies as well to secure your data privacy?
Well, blockchain is just the corridor. It's like the internet. Of course, you can secure your identity with other technologies. Mm-hmm. Actually, facial recognition, for instance, is an extension of your identity. It's like a second, way to validate, a second authentication process. So you can use other technologies, of course. Actually, blockchain by itself, it has value, but it's the combination with other deep tech that is going to change the world as we know it.
Makes sense. Yeah.
Also in terms of security.
Right. Can you elaborate on the value of protecting your identity and whether we need more robust measures to ensure that?
Well, first of all, because data, it's money. And suppose they sell your data in the dark web. But also, sometimes you don't know that they're selling your medical records to IBM for the IBM Watson, or they sell, your contacts, your birthday dates, and other information for other purposes. And you don't know that, you don't manage that, and you are giving companies a lot of information. Every time you Google, every time you do any movement in Facebook, that is information, and it means that somebody knows more of you than you by yourself. I mean, because they are tracking your data, they have your data for years, and they can process the data, and so they offer you products and services, but at the same time they resell the data. So your information is spread all around the web.
Right.
And now you are not able to control that. So your privacy, you own the data. I mean, it's your right to make a decision of what you want to do with that. So digital identity plus blockchain helps you first. You can manage, you can decide who can have access to the data.
Sure.
That's very important. Actually, for instance, in Canada, there is a proof of concept where in a hospital, it's the patient who decide who have access to his record. Okay. Second, you can sell information if you want to, especially as with the smart contracts. You will be able to decide in which terms you would like to allow others to use your data and the purpose at the same time. And actually, in this way, these blockchain and smart contracts are being used to sell music. So every time, you want, depending on the use of that property right, there's a smart contract that is signed. That is somebody that's already decided, but in which terms, the price of the music, for instance. On the other hand, what happens nowadays is that our data, as we spoke, is spread in the web. You don't have control of the data. You cannot use the data because it's in too many places. So one day you will have like a small box with all your data, and you will be able to manage your data on your behalf. For instance, you will be able to ask for some research, and for instance, every time you go to the doctor, they start asking you about what you eat, how, your level of exercise, and a lot of information, the kind of medicine you have used, whatever. Finally, it's just to have an idea of your lifestyle. Imagine if you could have all the data you have been, producing, and give the data, use the data using other technologies such as, machine learning, for instance, or, data processing. They could help you to, for instance, forecast if you have, a probability of any kind of disease because of your lifestyle, or, so you could be able to do things right on your behalf. And that's why it's very important. It's not just because it's money, it's also because it's your right to own your data, and it's your right to use your data in your favor.
Okay, right. That certainly makes more sense.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. And would you say that while blockchain hasn't solved the problem entirely, it has nonetheless reignited the debate around more measures that need to be taken in order to secure data?
Yes, also because in one way or another, blockchain is decentralizing power of data. Because what happened is that with the digital identity, I don't want the blockchains will be interoperate. You will be able to validate some, for instance, if you need to buy alcohol and they ask you your ID to see if you have enough age to do so, one day you will not need to show your ID. You will just need to validate that you are older than the minimum age that is allowed to consume alcohol. So that means that they will not store your data about your birth in a way that, so the data is going to be spread and not everyone's going to have all your information as it happens now. We have, as we spoke, we have a lot of data. Sometimes every time for instance, your ID, have a lot of data. So every time they ask you to put your ID, just to enter to a building, for instance, they get all the information. I mean, your birthday, the serious number of your ID, and that is something that is not needed. And so that's why blockchain is helping a lot with this decentralization of power in terms of centralizing data. Also, in terms of design, what blockchain is going to allow us is to, not store, but at least have all your reputational information centralized. You will be able to use, your behavior not just in the bank, also in other, situations. So reputation, you will have like a wider rating reputation. So that means that people that, for instance, they're just in the bank system and they have problems because they have to pay a loan, they will have a wider information to have a reputational rating. So the bank reputation is not going to be the only one. It's going to be you have a wider one. So that means there's going to be inclusion, because people that now is just judge on how of the information that banks and other conservative institution manage or centralized institution manage. They decide what you can or if you're a good person or not. So people will have access to broader services that they do today. So, imagine one day if you have, for instance, your records on if you are a good worker. That also is part of your reputation, but it's not stored anywhere.
Right.
So that's the kind of thing that blockchain is helping, but also being very, being very discreet on the way of how data is used. I mean, they don't need to give all the data to somebody to say that person is a good person. So through blockchain, everything is going to be connected. And it's going to be, you're not going to have the full information, the full disclosure of information. They will just have the validation that is needed. So that means that your privacy is also going to be secured not in a cybersecurity way, but in terms of your right on privacy.
Right. So you mentioned earlier that blockchain has discrete measures in place. So would it be correct to say that it ensures transparency?
Yes, actually, transparency is one of the principles that blockchain gives to all the transactions. I mean, transparency and trust. I would say that are the most important things. Transparency, is because, first of all, the information that is in a blockchain, you have transparency, of course, because first, if you do any movement, it's going to be stored in the blockchain. So you have to explain, for instance, if you want to revert a transaction, for instance, or if you are talking about a database, if you want to make a change, you'll need to, put a note and say, why are you doing that? And as everyone has access, or at least or not everyone, but at least it's auditable. I mean, the incentives of the people of what you do are it's that, I mean, doing the right thing. I want to tell you about a case in Argentina the government of Argentina was facing, in the public bidding, what they were facing was that they received the offers at the very last minute because the companies, they didn't trust that the information was not disclosed and given to the competitor. So they decide to use blockchain, and since then, because it's much more transparency and trust of when each offer arrives, when they are open, it completely changed the way on how the companies that are making their offers are, the timings at least. Now they trust because of transparency, and because this transparency, they trust. And that is one of the most important principles or values of blockchain. Especially nowadays, so in the world, we're facing a lack of trust. Absolutely. Actually, Bitcoin, that is the first application of blockchain, started after the financial crisis in 2008 because of the lack of trust.
Yeah.
So we have now a technology that can allow us to interact in a more transparent and trustable way. So that means that the information, the asymmetries of the information, where a lot of people were doing a lot of money with that gap of information, we want to reduce it with this technology, because then we can have more, not just transparent, it also has to do, more positive relations among people, and especially between people and institutions.
Absolutely. I think you've raised some great points that without this technology, no transaction is secure, and it certainly brings improvement together with cybersecurity. So just to wrap things up, how would you say blockchain is redefining the management of data?
Well, in a lot of ways. First of all, as we spoke, in terms of the distributed power, because now, with blockchain, institutions will not have all your data. So we are splitting the power into the web. Second, we spoke already about data privacy, in terms that if you're able to manage your data and who access to your data, you own your data, and that is very important. That is something that we forgot. Property rights, data that has to do with property rights can be preserved using smart contracts. Much more security standards I spoke about because of encryption and this chain of encrypted information that is going to make the hackers' life much more difficult. Also the value as incentive, because as you will be able to decide with blockchain smart contract in which terms do you want to sell your data. That means every time you use the web, you will know that if somebody wants to know more about you, you will decide that and in which terms. So you already know what happened with Facebook, the scandal about data some years ago. So that kind of situation will not happen again. If you close, for instance, your Facebook account, because you don't want them to use your data, it's going to be, your decision, and it's going to happen in real terms. Also, it has to do with integrity of the network in terms of we have already seen that models using blockchain to reward information that is right and to, how can I say, punish fake news. So with this kind of models, we are going to enable to have much more trustable information, because now if you go to the web, if somebody writes something bad about you, it's going to be stored there and you have nothing, nobody will, and if somebody Googles you and see that, they trust that information just because it's in the internet. And we have also faced a lot of fake news the last years. So we will have much more trustable and credible information in disposal. So that's also good. And also, as a final point, as we spoke, as in some way, data, you'll have all your data, but at the same time, they will be able to you'll have much wider reputation scorings. That means that a lot of people that today is not able to access to certain services or products, they will, because they can be rated in a proper way, because not just saying one bit of their life in a wider way. So that's why blockchain is so, how can I say, we speak about this blockchain revolution with Don, and I love the name of the book because of that. It's because it's going to change the way we interact, and that is something that we really need in this moment of our times, of these modern times. So, yes.
Yeah. All right, that wraps up our session. Thanks for joining us, Maria.
It has been a pleasure.
Thanks for listening to this episode by BetterTech. If you enjoyed this podcast, give it a thumbs up and don't forget to share it across your favorite social networking platform. We look forward to bringing you the latest industry news in our next episode. In the meantime, take a look at our other episodes and hit subscribe with the links in the description box below so that you don't miss out on the latest in tech.